Well, hello everyone. Wonderful to be with you today. This is pre-recorded for September 2nd, 2025. I'll be traveling during that period and not able to do a live session. I will return on September 16th to the normal schedule of twice monthly live sessions on Tuesdays at both 1 o'clock and 6:30. So let's just settle in first. Let's check in with the body, see how the body's getting along. Make sure that it's breathing. And just allow the breath to be however it is. It's fine. The body knows how to breathe, so just sit back and let it breathe. You can stay present and watch how the body moves with each breath. Maybe the belly rises and falls. Sense of air moving in and out of the nostrils. Just the direct sensation of it. You might also notice any sensation of sound in whatever space you are in, and just allow the sound to be received. Again, it doesn't need to be managed. The body knows how to hear without you trying to hear. You may pay attention to it or not, but the body receives that information and is aware of it. So any thought that may argue with the sound, prefer a different sound, try to describe the sound, all of that we can just let the mind do whatever it does. In the meantime, just receive the sound as auditory input, just as is. You can also sense into the spaciousness of maybe the room that you're in, or maybe the outside space that you are currently sitting in, and just feel into that space. Whether your eyes are open or closed, we can sort of have that sensation that we're within some particular space, physical space we're talking about. And within that physical space, there may be tables and chairs and perhaps walls and fans and pictures and carpets and whatever. There may also be this body-mind organism as one of the objects within this space. So we could say that all of these are appearances within the physical space of the room where you are. And so there are these appearances within the physical space, but then there's also the sensory capacity that you have to notice what is appearing within that space. And so just like we are aware of the movement of the body with the breath, or the receiving of vibrations, a sound to the body-mind, we can also be aware of being present within a physical space. But very much like the awareness of being in a physical space, there's also the awareness of thoughts as appearances within this awareness. So just like we allowed the sound to be received without needing to comment on it or decide whether we liked it or not, we can just allow thoughts to be also present without the need to change them in any way. Just allow them to come and go. Without interference, without judging them, without trying to change them or manage them. So just step back out of the managerial position. Much like the physical space of the room allows objects to be in the room, it allows you to enter the room and leave the room, much like thoughts enter your awareness and leave the awareness. Almost always in favor of another thought entering, staying for a while, and then leaving. So we're just all we're doing is sensing into your immediate perceptual sensory environment. So whether it is the movement of the body, the sense of hearing, visual perception of objects nearby, thought, feelings, memories, whatever may be appearing exactly where you are, just allow it to be. Just allow it to be seen, be heard, be felt, without the need to try to get anywhere, to fix anything, to understand anything. Just that direct experience, just that raw capacity of the body-mind to experience whatever is present for it within your field of perception. And what we might notice is that all of these appearances, whether sight or sound or internal feelings or a thought, whatever may be appearing, there's many appearances, and then there's this one capacity that we all have already to be knowingly present for whatever arises. Many appearances, one capacity of awareness, able to hear, able to see, able to notice a thought. Whatever the appearance is, the awareness is present, you could say, to notice it. Okay, and you might notice that we haven't sort of imagined this awareness. We didn't suddenly become worthy of the awareness. We didn't sort of attain any high elevated state where that awareness was present and not previous. And all we may have done is just slow down our perceptual process enough to notice what was already present. So this awareness that is present, a capacity that we all have in equal measure, to notice what is arising. We may or may not pay attention. That's a different question. But for example, we might hear things that the mind decides it's not worthy to notice. But we did receive that information and the mind dismissed it. So we may not pay attention to everything within our field of perception, but the body-mind has an awareness of it. So we might ignore, let's say we live in a city, we might ignore traffic noise and police sirens and airplanes flying overhead and neighbors talking on the street. We might ignore all that because it's just ordinary. But if there was a sudden loud knock on the door, suddenly we would pay attention because it's something that awareness recognizes is of importance. So it's the awareness is there, but the attention may be directed in certain ways. So we can just step back into this innate awareness that's present for everyone and notice perhaps that it is already quiet. The mind may or may not be, often is not. So we can allow the mind to do what it does. But what notices the mind, what notices even the busy mind, is this quiet, already present awareness. And we can become curious about this awareness. Exactly where does it arise from? Can we find a point of origin? Or might it be more true to say that it seems to be in the vicinity, but I can't quite pinpoint an origin? Can we determine its size? I mean, if we Notice that everything in the room is within our field of perception. The walls, the ceiling, the carpet, the chairs are all within this field of perception. Does this awareness extend to the perimeter of the room? Yes. How about if we look at the moon at night? That also is within our field of perception. Also within an appearance, within awareness. So what we might notice is that everything that we have ever experienced in our entire life has always appeared within this field of awareness. In fact, it's not possible to know of anything beyond this field of awareness. So vast. So just notice that all of that, the entirety of our life, is unfolding within the awareness that you are. So don't take that on as a concept, but just feel into it, because it can be sensed directly, very easily, as we did today, and just sensing in through the body and noticing that there's something that's already aware of whatever the perceptions are. So the recommendation is just to come back to that space of being knowingly present for whatever's arising, often throughout the day. It doesn't have to be for extended periods, even for a minute or two or three is enough. If we come back often enough. That repetition is really, really helpful. More helpful than, waiting 2 weeks when we'll have time to sit down for 30 minutes. We can recognize that this awareness is present every time we slow down enough to notice. Okay, good. Everybody here? So today I thought we could talk about using discontentment as motivation. So contentment is simply being happy with the way things are. And we can be content and, let's say, stagnant in our life, or we can be content because we're just happy with how life is unfolding. So one can be stagnation, one can be a state of grace, similar in some ways, but ultimately very, very different. But until we get there can be this sense of discontentment. And that can feel like stagnation, it can feel like restlessness, frustration, disappointment, maybe even depression, wondering how this is all going to turn out. Those kind of feelings, which aren't comfortable, right? They're not something that we can necessarily see our way through, like, how do I resolve this? And what most people do with that is just try to put a Band-Aid on it and try to amuse oneself as to the extent that we sort of cover up that sense of restlessness or frustration by dinner out with friends, a movie, little entertainment, watching the next ball game, and so on. All of which are fine. I mean, life is to be enjoyed also. But if that is our continued pattern, just to jump from one amusement to the next and hope that we won't ever have to experience these uncomfortable feelings of frustration or restlessness, then we're just treading water. And the thing about treading water is you have to keep doing it. If you stop doing it, you sink. So just to keep our head above water, having to continuously come up with some form of stimulation, something to hope for, look forward to, entertain ourselves with, distract ourselves with. And, there's plenty of opportunities with the electronic devices that nearly all of us have these days. There's endless opportunities to just amuse ourselves. And if that's how you choose to use your life energy, I'm totally okay with that. But the question is, if that sense arises, we could also use that energy as motivation to look more deeply. Like, why is there this discontent or restlessness? And one of the Buddha's Four Noble Truths, it talks about this sense of unsatisfactoriness. And it can be seen as, well, life is just sort of unsatisfactory and that's the way it is and get used to it. But I suggest that it is actually a positive force because it's only through that sense of unsatisfactoriness, that discontent, that we get off the couch, either physically or metaphorically, get off the couch and actually do something, move forward. And we may not know initially where that movement will take us. We can't really know where that movement will take us. But just that sense of being pushed by this discontentment is a motivational force to seek something else. And so that is the positive benefit of it. We might engage in various spiritual practices, maybe even yoga or meditation, and we can use these practices to sort of regain a sense of balance, of quiet the mind a bit. And, it's fine to do that. It's one of the benefits of yoga and meditation is to really settle the body-mind. It's good for the body-mind, these practices. But if we're using it as a medicine almost to sort of relieve the symptoms, then we're, in a sense, using it as an aspirin to resolve, let's say, to resolve a headache rather than looking for the cause of the headache at the most root level. So this is what one of the things that we can notice about our practice. Are we just doing it to feel better, to get to some reasonable level of peace and quietude, or are we really using it to see what that underlying sense of unsatisfactoriness is really about? So what we might notice is this sense of suffering. Suffering is maybe too strong a word in many cases. Sometimes it can be, just like dissatisfaction, a little unease, a little not quite sure what's not right, but it doesn't feel like life is paying out like I thought it would. So I make a distinction between pain and suffering. Pain is those unavoidable circumstances that cause physical or emotional pain. And life has those for all of us at some time in our life. Suffering, as I use the word, is different. Suffering is what we tell ourselves about the circumstances, telling ourselves things like, that shouldn't be, it's not right, it's not fair, why me? All of those kind of arguments with what's actually happening. And this suffering, as I'm using the term, makes the pain feel worse, right? Because there's the physical pain. It's possible to experience that, but what we tell ourselves about it, like, when's it going to end? How come the doctor didn't fix this? Who did what? Someone else is to blame. Whatever the argument with what is happening, that can exacerbate the discomfort. So suffering is a pointer. It's a pointer towards what we may be telling ourselves that's not in alignment with life as it's unfolding. It's our argument with life. If we can see suffering or discomfort as a pointer rather than a problem to be fixed, it's much more useful, right? And I'm not saying that suffering is therefore good and more suffering is better. That's been tried by various religions in the past, and it's a very ego-enhancing thing and leads nowhere. So I'm not talking about that at all. I'm talking about using it as a pointer to look to see what the underlying belief is that's supporting whatever it is that we're telling ourselves about how, let's say, how disappointing life is. So we have these two things happening. We have this pushing from a sense of discontent, sometimes called divine discontent, right? Pushing us towards the divine because of discomfort with how things are. So that's one movement. And the other movement is a longing for something beyond ourselves that we may not be able to explain or say exactly where that longing is coming from. So there's both a pushing and a pulling happening at the same time, but both have value, right? So if we can really see this discontentment as a motivating force, as energy to be used to look for something more significant, let's say. So contentment isn't reached by suppressing discontentment. You would think that would work, but it doesn't. Suppressing anything ultimately doesn't work. But what we can do is see all of the ways that our mind comes up with that convinces us to be discontented, and look at those underlying beliefs. That we can do. Look at those thought processes that may be quite conditioned, that pull us into a sense of frustration or blame or envy or despair or all of those kinds of so-called negative energies. That we can do. So we can't get to a state of contentment by merely trying not to be discontented. That doesn't work. Notice all of the ways, all of the beliefs that pull us into that state of discontentment, and really see through those. If we understand them, they lose their power. We can't really drop a belief if we haven't examined it. Any unexamined belief has, in a sense, has power over us because we don't understand it, and yet it operates through this body-mind organism. So one of the things that we can ask is, what's lacking now that we imagine will be present at some future point? Perhaps when I get enlightened, then what? What do you imagine will be present then that isn't present now? We can imagine the fruits of enlightenment, feeling good and blissful and everything working out like we want it to. But what we can do is try to see precisely what it is that we believe we lack in this moment that we expect to find at some future moment. How we'll feel, and is that feeling absent now? That we can look at. Because whatever we think is absent now that we'll find in the future is an illusion. Because what we will really find in the future, if that discovery happens in this lifetime, we will discover that it has always been here. Therefore, it is present now, as is, in this current body-mind. That's what we'll discover. So any argument with that statement is the illusion that can be investigated. So the thinking mind is useful in this investigation, right? It may be a flawed instrument, being a thoroughly conditioned mental structure, but it's the only instrument that we have that can use logic to investigate all of the beliefs and ideas that we may be holding, and all of them, all beliefs, ultimately will be found not to be true. Not ultimately. They may be relatively true, they may be true most of the time, may be true for most people, but they won't be absolutely true all the time for all people. And that's what I mean by being true, being absolutely true. So what I'm describing is effortful. It does require work. It requires our willingness to remain with these feelings of dissatisfactoriness, restlessness, anxiety, those kinds of feelings that aren't comfortable just to be with, but that's what's required to really remain present for them to be able to understand them, to be able to see how they move in your particular body-mind organism. So ultimately, what the thinking mind can be helpful to do is to see the limits of conceptual thinking, because that's what the mind can do. It can think conceptually. So this is helpful in terms of understanding what's not true, but it's not helpful in understanding what is ultimately true. And the reason for that is what is ultimately true is not a concept. And the mind can only think conceptually, thinks in words, ideas, concepts, beliefs, dogmas, philosophies. So effort will be required up to a certain point, up to the point that where we really see the limitations of the logical mind, see the limitations of belief, any belief. At some point we are willing to move sort of outside the space capsule, outside the limitations of what we take ourselves to be as this body-mind, and recognize that there is this deeper sense of just this awake, spacious presence. We can call it awareness, we can call it consciousness, true nature, Buddha nature, the unborn, whatever you like, we can, but there is that sense of something beyond the conceptual. That's where the mind can't go. And up till that point, to the point where we recognize that, put our trust in the thinking mind to tell us how to live life, tell us what's right and wrong, and how we're doing and what we should do better and so on, how to interpret life. But at some point, as we move past this self-limiting capacity of belief in ideas, conceptual, we discover that there's something much vaster within which our entire experience unfolds. We access that, we recognize that, generally when we see the limitation of thought stream. So we come about it by seeing what isn't it. We can't really seek our true nature. We can't seek it because we are it. And so any attempt to seek it denies its presence here and now. So just by seeking it, we miss it. But what we can do is see what's obscuring our recognition of it. That we can do. And that process is to really investigate all the belief systems that cause us to feel contracted, to be pulled back into a state of contraction, discontentment, right? So again, we can use that sense of something's not quite right. I feel discontented. We can use that energy as a pointer to push us towards a deeper understanding. So our job is to remain curious, open, attentive, not to chase after ideas, not to run away from feelings or memories or fears, right? To remain present for whatever arises. What we can remain present for, we will come to understand. It's not our job to fix it. It's not our job to fix, let's say, our regret or our fears or habits or our conditioning. What we can do is be attentive to it and allow the greater intelligence of this awareness to do the heavy lifting of transforming these tendencies that pull us away from a deeper seeing. So this process can sound somewhat laborious, and it may take a while. It's not going to happen overnight unless it does. There's no one path. There's no one progression for everyone. Everyone will have a completely unique path. The point is to trust how life is unfolding for you. Doesn't mean that you have to continue doing the same things that you've always done, but trust how it unfolds, because life knows what it's doing, and it's doing everything it possibly can to wake you up at all times. By considering the possibility that that statement is true, opens us up to each and every moment. So we're not just sitting around waiting for some future explosive moment that will reveal everything. Life is being lived at every moment, so we don't have to wait. So what eventually happens is not that all our questions get answered. We don't end up with an encyclopedic knowledge of how life works. What we end up with is the questions drop away because the questioner drops away. It's not that we don't still have a remnant of an ego, but we no longer believe that that is my essential self. It still functions. We still have to function through this body-mind, but we lose the ability to believe that that's what I am. What I am is this spaciousness, this presence, emptiness, if you like, alive, awake emptiness, living through this body-mind appearing in the world of form. So our questions don't get answered, but this questioner, this which is this mind, this human mind that wants to know, that wants to understand. And we think that's a good thing. And it is in, normal everyday events, workaday world, yes. But what we're talking about here is this movement of trying to understand is actually a form of wanting to control life. Me as a separate person, want to control how the world is perceived, how I perceive my role in the world of form. But that's not actually what's happening. What's happening is the entirety of the world, the manifest world, including these body minds, which are a part of that manifest world, are appearing within awareness. So there's a famous Buddhist analogy, and it talks about crossing the river, right? We're on this side of the river, we're living in a world of illusion, and we want to get to the other side of the river, the awake, enlightened state. And we need a raft to get through, across the river to the other side. And so the raft is the spiritual practices, effort, trying to understand the mechanism. That's the raft. But when we get to the other side, we make that effort. We get to the other side using the raft. But once we're on the other side, we don't pick up the raft and put it on our head and carry it around with us for the rest of our life. The point is to wake up from the self-imposed limitations taken on in innocence, unconsciously, generally during childhood, and to see through those to the extent that they no longer dictate our life. That is the freedom. Then we are free to live life on life's terms as life shows up without argument. No argument with this particular being, no argument with other beings and other species as they show up in our life, no argument with the world, no argument with the divine. No argument, no discontentment. Right? With no argument, there's just an okayness with how life shows up. It sounds flat, right? But it's not at all. It allows us to enjoy however life presents itself, which is always changing, always quite amazing, always in movement, always impermanent, and we get to be along for the ride for as long as that lasts. Beautiful.